So Parliament set to return Wednesday. Both Conservative leader Erin O'Toole and the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, both self-isolating with COVID-19. Not sure when the last time is that we had a leader of the official opposition absent from the House for a speech from the throne. These are different times indeed. And a speech delivered by a Governor General who's being investigated for claims of harassment against her by her staff. So lots of things different about this time around. Let's bring in our regular panel of parliamentary press gallery journalists. Susan Delacourt, columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. And John Ivison is a columnist with the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Post Media. It's good to see you folks all again as we start another season, albeit this time virtually. We'll see how long that lasts. Susan, let me start with you. Let's talk about the return of Parliament and the speech from the throne. There's both opportunity and a risk for the Prime Minister here. Let's talk about the opportunity first. What is it?
Well, I think the opportunity has changed from when he originally announced it as this big master plan for a post-pandemic world, build back better. I think that was the original idea. I think what we have now is a speech that's got to somehow speak for an anxious nation, a nation that is very worried about a second wave. We are here in Ontario. Parliament is here in Ontario, where a second wave looks to be about official, right next door to Quebec, where the same thing is happening. So I guess the opportunity for him is to actually speak more than just from his front doorstep, as he did so much through the spring, and tell the country that it's going to be okay. The risk is that things are not okay, and that things are way less okay than they were when this original plan started.
All right, John, let me go to you. Opportunity and risk, what do you think they are for the Prime Minister?
Well, he does have the opportunity to strike the right note, and I think, as Susan said, that there was a real risk that he was going to strike the wrong note by campaigning and putting money behind really liberal campaign hobby horses. This Build Back Better, I mean, I was hearing a figure of about $100 billion in new money being allocated to many green projects that they've wanted to get done. They were going to remake the country in their own image. And I think at the moment, the country is so anxious that it's not in the mood for that. I think they have reset, and they're not going to be quite as strident on some of the issues that they have crusaded on in the past. I think their healthcare is going to be to the fore, to the point where when the premiers came into town the other day and were campaigning for more healthcare dollars, it was kind of odd in that, it was a bit dog bites man rather than man bites dog. I mean, healthcare premiers have always demanded more healthcare money, but then Dominic LeBlanc in the press conference that followed said that the Prime Minister was open to the idea of sitting down with the premiers this fall and discussing the Canada Health transfer. So I think health there will be green initiatives, but I think many of them were foreshadowed in the report from the task force that came out last week, mainly centred around the retrofit of homes and businesses. But I don't think it will be quite as green as it might have been.
Right. Joël-Denis, let me hear from you on both what you think the opportunity is for the Prime Minister and the risk.
Well, when the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament in August, I think he let it go that he had a very ambitious agenda when he wanted to reconvene Parliament and present a speech from the throne. But reality has brought him back on earth, I would say. Reality is that the situation is not totally under control in many provinces. And so he's got to go back to almost plan A, which is fight this virus, make sure that Canadians remain healthy. So I'm sure that there's been a lot of changes to the speech from the throne that he was originally anticipating to deliver in the Senate, that the Governor General was supposed to deliver in the Senate this week. So changes probably will be made until the last minute. And so the risk is that the speech has to be, adapted to the reality of today, which is a second wave is coming. We've seen it in two provinces, as Susan has mentioned, in Ontario first, and now in Quebec, it's officially a second wave. And there are many areas where they might be going back into lockdown. So that speech from the throne, the risk is that if there's no, it's not attached to reality, the Prime Minister may be seen as the person who's not in touch with reality on the ground.
The Premier of British Columbia today, John Horgan, called an election for October 24th. So BC and New Brunswick will have had elections during the pandemic, maybe others, Saskatchewan perhaps. Justin Trudeau, you recall, said he doesn't want an election, but also said it's irresponsible to say it's irresponsible to have an election during the pandemic. Susan, how did you read that comment? And do you think an election in the near future is off the table completely now federally?
No, I don't think it's off the table. Although I think what I wrote about at the time was I think he was getting carried away. And I think what he was talking about was the by-elections that he's called. He's called them for October 26th. And I think he was anticipating that he was going to get criticism for calling by-elections in the middle of a pandemic. So trying to get out front of that and leading everybody, including Joan Bryden, Canadian Press, just asked him, wait a minute, it sounds a lot like you want an election.
Right.
I'm not convinced he doesn't want one. I think there are all kinds of reasons why this would be a better time than maybe next spring for one for him. But I also think, speaking of risk, that could look enormously crass and cynical, especially as we're in a second wave.
John, what are your thoughts on that? Election off the table now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Jagmeet Singh had said the throne speech would not be the trigger for it in any case because, there are no specific spending implications in the throne speech. So it would only come after a mini budget or fiscal update, whatever they call it, which is likely, I guess, in November or even December. You're getting kind of late in the day then. I don't think that Singh, in any case, wants an election.
Although he's saying to me today, John, that he wants to see some action in the time between the speech from the throne and the vote on the speech from the throne. He's talking about wanting to see some sort of promise of legislation from the government to enact these measures he's been talking about even before the vote on the speech from the throne.
I do think that he has got to look a bit more bellicose and independent than he has looked, because otherwise he's just an adjunct of the Liberal Party. I mean, these Liberals are in a hurry, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for the NDP right now. So I think that they've learned the lesson from decades past when the NDP got too cosy with the Liberals, and really put themselves out of business. I mean, what's the raison d'etre for the NDP if the Liberal Party is going to be the party of the left? So I think Singh is clearly being more demanding, but still, if it goes to an election, a lot of NDP supporters are going to be quite happy with what the Liberals are likely to offer in this throne speech and subsequent budget.
Joël-Denis, let me ask you about the possibility of an election, but whether you think the throne speech will give us any sense of whether the government's committed to a fiscal plan on top of all the new spending we're likely to see, whether it's going to signal that it has a plan for getting the expenditures under control, or at least tying them to what everybody calls this fiscal anchor.
Well, as for the elections, I agree with my colleagues that I think it is mostly off the table this fall because of the second wave coming up. And now the British Columbia government has called an election. So that takes, a lot of the time frame that the government would like to, the federal government could use to call an election. So I think it's off the table until at least the spring of 2021, which is, the most likely scenario. We'll be now into 18 months of a minority government, and that's usually the lifetime of a minority government. Now, as for the fiscal anchor, I think there's a lot of pressure for the government to put something out of the window there to make sure that, the fiscal discipline that we've seen over the last 30 years is not out of the window. Madame Chrystia Freeland spoke about this to the former finance minister and former prime minister Paul Martin, who's the one who slayed the dragon, the deficit dragon, in the 1990s with the Jean Chrétien government. And I think she's taking this seriously. And she's getting a lot of also signals from so-called blue liberals, the John Manley liberals, right, the Paul Martin liberal, that they need to do something about this. Otherwise, it's the fiscal situation that may be in danger, not only in Canada, but internationally.
Okay, Susan, can I hear you I got about 20 seconds each for you and John here as our time runs out on where on this issue of a fiscal anchor and what we might see signaled in the speech from the throne.
I think Chrystia Freeland being there helps. She's been doing a lot of talking to people. She's been doing a lot of consulting. And what JD said, she's been hearing from blue liberals in spades. So I do expect that there will be some nod toward discipline because they are hearing that out there.
What are your thoughts, John, on this to finish up?
Yeah, I think that the David Dodge suggested last week, for example, an anchor of about 1%, deficits 1% of GDP. But to do that, you can't just increase spending in this next budget by 100 billion, or even half of that, and hope to get to somewhere around 1% of GDP within 4 or 5 years.
All right, lots to watch coming up on Wednesday in the return of the House. Thank you all for our first gathering of the season. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.